Thank you very much, Caroline. And I just want to say good evening, everybody. As Caroline said, I am the Vice President of the Robbinsville Democratic Club, and I am one of the co-organizers of this event. So I just want to start off by saying, so our goal for this event really is to create a space where we as the Robbinsville community can come together as a team and basically work towards our mission of becoming an anti-racist town. Right now, in this moment of crisis, we can see the toll that racism takes. We can see a massive disparity in deaths from COVID-19, access to the COVID-19 vaccine, in wealth, education, and susceptibility to natural disasters like we're seeing in Texas, as well as treatment by the criminal justice system. These disparities are rooted in racist systems, both past and present. On an individual level, we can see that racial bias and microaggressions are as prevalent as ever. So many of you might think to yourselves, what does anti-racism really mean? You know, I know that I'm not racist, isn't that enough? And really, to be anti-racist means to take an active role in addressing these issues. To be anti-racist means to not be neutral or passive, and to speak up and speak out when you see injustices. Really, to be anti-racist means to take action. So I've lived in Robbinsville for 4 years, and I've been proud of the steps that our community has taken. And as with anything, we can always strive to be better and do better. And I really believe that Robbinsville has the potential to be a leader in anti-racism, but we have to put in the work. And we have to acknowledge that that work is not always going to be easy. And I want to express right now that it's extremely encouraging to me to see so many people on the participant list tonight. And to me, this is really a sign that there's a real energy behind this cause right here in Robbinsville. And this is really a good start. So on a personal note, I'm really looking forward to learning tonight from our incredible lineup of local activists and leaders that are on our panel. And I'm so excited to hear from these amazing individuals. I encourage everybody in the audience to approach this forum the way I will, and that is with an open mind, to strive to learn something from the viewpoints and experiences expressed tonight. Also, I would like to recommend that you take notes if you can. And because anti-racism is all about action, my challenge to each and every one of you is to identify one action item tonight and put it on your calendar, your to-do list, and follow through with it in the near future. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker for tonight, Assemblyman Dan Benson. A dedicated lifelong resident of Hamilton, New Jersey, Dan Benson has been serving the local community for most of his life. At age 25, the Assemblyman became the youngest elected councilman in Hamilton. Dan Benson was elected to the Assembly in 2011 and now serves as the current chair of the Assembly Law and Public Safety Committee, as a member of the Assembly Health and Senior Services Committee, as well as the Assembly Transportation and Independent Authorities Committee. One thing that I've noticed is that achieving equity is always a guiding principle to Mr. Benson's legislative work. And the most recent example of this was his introduction of a bill package designed to make public transportation more accessible to New Jersey residents with special needs. And on a personal level, I've always found Assemblyman Benson to be very accessible and responsive to constituents. And I should also mention that he has been a mentor to our club since our beginning in 2019. So I'd like to ask everybody to give a warm virtual welcome to Assemblyman Dan Benson.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Scott. And I love the fact that you have children's artwork in the background, just like I do. I like oftentimes when I'm doing these talks to use my son's virtual school workspace. One, I think it lightens the mood a little bit, but also just reflects my own pride in being a dad and raising a 5-year-old during these interesting times, along with my life partner, my wife, Dr. Hyundai Benson, who's actually just downstairs teaching a night class at Drexel virtually as well. So hopefully our Wi-Fi will be fine. But I'm really excited that we have this conversation today because I think for a lot of folks, whether it was the murder of George Floyd or other the protests from Black Lives Matters, or what we saw at the Capitol on January 6th, there is an awakening that I think is happening all across our country. And we've had various periods in our history of this. And it's a great opportunity, I think, for all of us to kind of assess where we are as a country, as a community, but more importantly, where each of us individually are as well. As Democrats, we ascribe to equity and racial and social justice. But as Scott mentioned, that isn't, if we're going to be anti-racist, that means we have to actively take efforts to do that. And so when we talk about removing barriers or equity, it's not always about lifting somebody else up. It's oftentimes removing the barrier so that everyone has equal access. So in my life, I really try to focus on, I serve on the health committee, transportation, and I serve on budget. Budget, very important when we talk about equity discussions, because as we always say, our budgets are moral documents. And if you're not putting money behind the policies that you're talking about, then you're really not prioritizing that. And that's why I'm really proud as a legislature that we prioritized not only body cameras for police, but funding for them at the state level. Not only equity in transportation, but funding mass transit so that those that are transit dependent, those that either due to age, due to income, due to physical ability, may not be able to own or operate a car, as Scott mentioned. Passing a bus rider's Bill of Rights to make sure that, again, just because there is a bus isn't worth it for someone trying to get to a job if it shows up late or there's not enough buses to meet demand. I'm proud that in this past session, there's been over 30 different bills sponsored mostly by the Assembly Black Caucus, that many of those that have already become law. You heard already the mention of the body camera bill, but also we've seen so often in the news folks making false 911 calls, mostly to intimidate or harass a person based on their race or other protected class. That was signed into law to now make that a higher crime. Making sure that we recruit more minorities and women to our police forces. Making sure that implicit bias prevention, which many of our police departments are already doing, along with de-escalation training, really is at the center of much of the work. And I really need to highlight and lift up the leadership of my partner in the 14th District, Senator Linda Greenstein, who is the chair of the Senate's Law and Public Safety Committee. She really has been instrumental as a partner in making sure many of these bills make it out of committee and onto the Senate floor, and allowing us on the Assembly side as well to make it get done. Making sure there's crisis intervention lessons in our police training commission. Eliminating mandatory minimum prison sentences is something that's being debated now. Something that's close to my heart that was signed into law in our last session was a restorative justice in education program that is now being implemented. What that bill does, it recognizes that we see the statistics about how justice oftentimes is biased towards Black members of our community. We see that with the war on drugs, but that also happens in our education system too. You're more likely to get a severe punishment based on your race than if you're a white student. So the restorative justice bill that I sponsored and that was passed actually provides incentives to school districts to look into restorative justice practices that not only looks at when there's something that happens between students, not only the person that perpetrates it to see that they receive a punishment, but to make sure that the victim is also listened to and that they feel that there's a just outcome. What often happens is you get a cycle of violence or a cycle of conflict that leads to greater truancy or greater disciplinary actions to both the victim and the perpetrator. And so by establishing some of these restorative justice, this helps not only on racial justice, but religious and other minority or protected classes, that their education, particularly our students, receive not only a great education, but in a place where they're valued and listened. And we look at things not about what did somebody do wrong, but also what is happening to our students at this time in their lives, and how do we make those lives better? Because that's what our goals are, to keep them out of the judicial system or in the criminal system. And I think for far too long, we've talked about the prison to pipeline system and how, for the most part, we've not valued all of our children equally and have passed folks on to law enforcement, unfortunately. Thankfully, we've seen so many changes, whether it be in law enforcement, whether it be in education, but there's always more that we can do. So as an elected official, how do I try to view being a partner? And I know we hear the word ally quite a bit. I try to say partner a little bit more, mostly because I do think that word ally has been used so much. And so kind of the things that I look to do, I'm open to listening. I think that's something that comes naturally to me as an elected official, but I think it's important to listen to other people's stories and center them in their stories. Acknowledge that, being a person growing up in the community that I have, that I might have implicit biases myself. Doing my own research to learn about the community's history of struggle. Oftentimes we hear about the civil rights movement, but have we done our own history about what is the history here in Mercer County or in Trenton, in Hamilton, in Robbinsville? Oftentimes we kind of neglect our own backyard when trying to learn that history and seeing how that informs where we are today. Again, doing that inner work to try to figure out how are we participating in systems that might be that may be contributing to things that are oppressive to members of our community. How do we help to change those systems by being active and taking time either to protest, to change legislation, to partner with others that have great ideas and lift them up? And again, using that privilege that I recognize that I have to amplify other people's voices that maybe have historically been suppressed. And then how to accept criticism and grace. I know I'm going to make mistakes. And that's why I love these conversations here, because it's an opportunity not only to learn, but to make those mistakes that'll lead to greater learning. We talk to our children all the time to tell them it's okay to make mistakes. That's how we learn. As we learn about tolerance and racial and social justice, we have to be willing to make mistakes, own those mistakes, and listen to others and accept those criticism, even if that makes us uncomfortable. And then every day, it's our job to get up and work on how to become better partners. Some of the things I try not to do, I try not to center myself. As politicians, we try to be empathic and try to put ourselves in other people's shoes. Mm-hmm. It's important for us to recognize some experiences and some of the lives that people have left. I am never going to know what it's like to be a Black man or a Black woman growing up. But that doesn't mean that I should expect to be taught to learn how that is. Or it shouldn't mean that I shouldn't be trying to be a partner to fight against oppression. You don't have to be able to empathize to sympathize in many cases. We often do something, we do this not just for racial, but in general. We often try to compare our own experience and say, well, yeah, I was discriminated against once when I was young, or I had this bad experience. Oftentimes that's centering yourself and not recognizing it's saying to someone else, you're not listening to their plight or their own lived experience. So it's important sometimes to be quiet and listen. My running mate, Wayne D'Angelo, has a saying that his grandfather taught him. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we would listen twice as much as we speak. And I think that's just so important to take to heart when we talk about these issues. Don't take credit for other people's work. It's particularly those that came before you. It's to recognize the work that's being done by elders and leaders in our community, but also recognize that our youth are there who may not know that history. And it's important to elevate them and not tell them, well, they have to wait their turn too, when we need everybody's involvement when it comes to racial justice. And don't assume that everyone has had that same experience that are part of an oppressed minority or group. Oftentimes that's as bad as making assumptions in other ways. So when I do my legislation, I try to inform it from the stories that people tell me. I got involved in politics because I love hearing people's stories. I love to learn ways that I can help to solve problems, but also understand that my job is to empower other people's voices and help solutions rise to the top, not necessarily with me leading the way, but me sometimes following and providing whatever support that they're willing to take. And if, again, being willing sometimes to sit back and let others take that lead. So I'm so proud of the panel that we have today, and to see my dear friend, Commissioner Frisbee, as the moderator. He actually took my spot on the Freeholder Board, now Commissioner, Board of Commissioners. And it is just wonderful to see the work that Mercer County Freeholder Board and our county executive are doing in this area. It's really impressive. It's something that didn't just happen in the last few years. It is something that has been ingrained in their spirit since Democrats took over many years ago, almost 20 years ago now. And so I am very proud to be part of this county. I know we have a lot of work to do, and that's why, as taking my own advice, I'm now going to step back, sit back and listen, and I'm ready to learn. So I want to, again, thank everyone. I'm going to turn it back over to Scott.